I'm not sure if you noticed, but Gary Lineker has been in a bit of trouble.
Au revoir.
Everybody loves Gary with his big grin and slick presenting. Well, unless you hate Walker's Crisps, Leicester, Tottenham, football itself, or it's just his politics. Gary Lineker is a football legend on and off the pitch, thanks to his goals at club level, as well as for the England national team. Fans remember his goal-scoring run that won him the Golden Boot in the 1986 World Cup, and his goals that helped England reach a memorable and cultural-defining semi-final at Italia 90. Or how he once pooed himself during a football game. Football Twitter won't let you forget that one. Following his retirement, he embarks on a career in sports media and worked as a pundit and later presenter for Match of the Day. From here, your mum's new boyfriend entertained millions with his quips to camera, his calm and relaxed presenting style, or even stripping to his pants after Leicester City won the league. He is also the BBC's top-earning presenter, something that is often thrown to attack the publicly funded BBC, so your money probably paid for those shorts. On Twitter, he's known for two things. He's prolific for sharing jokes that he may or may not have written, but in this case, he is known for sharing political views which are often critical of the government. On Tuesday, March 7th, Lineker commented on a Twitter video shared by the Home Secretary in which he unveiled government plans to stop migrant boats across the Channel. He then followed up the tweet to criticise the language used by the Home Secretary and compared it to the language used by 1930s Germany. Now, as a BBC journalist, they are covered by strict guidelines to remain impartial as per the code of the BBC and its remit. The corporation's social media guidelines are meant to govern BBC staff and presenters who work on news and politics, not those in other areas such as sport. Yet Gary Lineker is technically a freelancer and shouldn't be under the same guidelines of BBC employees. Gary was free to criticise the human rights record of Qatar in the lead up to the controversial 2022 World Cup, as well as highlight it during their opening coverage. But he couldn't criticise a new government policy that aimed to stop the boats crossing the English Channel and clamp down on illegal immigration. In the following days, tweets from critics, MPs in Parliament, and figures followed and then overtook the coverage of the main actual story. However, Lineker received support from other political figures, including Alistair Campbell and Journo, as well as plenty of football fans and pundits. During this time, Gary was hung out to dry and subject to a number of stories from rage outlets calling on him to apologise. The BBC said they were going to discuss the situation as pressure mounted on the presenter and whether he would apologise. Then it happened. He was suspended. Or maybe he was asked to step aside. Just depends on where you heard that from.
It's one of those strange situations where I'm actually texting the man himself at the moment, and I've asked Gary Lineker the question about whether he is stepping back or whether the BBC have told him to step back, and I've told him that if he responds to me that I will read out that text on air.
Okay, good. So
there's one word in there I can't use, but he has said no, they've told me I have to step back.
So it's not his choice.
Yeah, Gary Lineker wants to continue to present Match of the Day and is not apologising for what he said, but he says it's a BBC decision to force him to not present the programme at the moment.
Wow.
Gary stood firm, didn't want to apologise for the tweets, and wasn't able to accept the BBC's social media policy, and he wasn't going to present Saturday's Match of the Day. It then created this bizarre situation where a BBC reporter doorstepped BBC Director General Tim Davie about a BBC issue, who then repeated the BBC statement to the reporter.
I don't want to add to the statement. I think we've had very constructive discussions. The statement's very clear, and that's where we are. As editor-in-chief of the BBC, I think one of our founding principles is impartiality, and that's what we're delivering on.
Lineker's absence created a I'm Spartacus moment where Ian Wright, Alan Shearer, Jermaine Genius, Alex Scott, and other presenters announced they won't be on Match of the Day or their football coverage during the weekend. Pundits pulled out, match commentators agreed not to work, and the PFA said they didn't want to provide their players and clubs to speak to BBC reporters. This led to radio and TV football shows cancelled and replaced with pre-recorded content. Meanwhile, many people online supported their decisions to pull out in solidarity, yet others felt that Gary should be off TV once and for all. The matter was so mind-boggling that one Sky News reporter appeared to shut down live on TV.
Is the BBC losing control over the situation? The communications to Rachel Venables there.
As 5 Live and other coverage was cancelled, Gary Lineker instead went and watched his beloved Leicester City play, which is what he would have done anyway if he was working, the bloomin' Maverick. With practically no one actually covering the games at the BBC, Match of the Day still went ahead, but instead was rebranded as this weird show called Premier League Highlights. Now, this bizarre show was cut down to just 20 minutes, no commentary, very condensed highlights of the games, and no actual analysis. If anything, it was an advertisement of what makes Match of the Day good, and staple of Saturday nights for decades. The extended highlights of games, commentary that captures the mood, the context of every goal, and also analysis which helps us understand the game we just watched. In those 20 minutes, I actually wanted to hear Danny Murphy's voice. But for balance, some MPs even claimed it made the coverage better. Maybe football's got bored of experts as well. In an attempt to be smug over the situation, GB News presented its own alternative Match of the Day, which comprised of 4 idiots who attempted to discuss the games. Except they couldn't properly do it because they didn't actually have any football rights, so it felt quite amateur and similar to a YouTube watch-along.
Patrick, do you have an emotional affection for Leeds? Because when I grew up, they were a massive team.
No, I am a Manchester United fan, so I would quite happily see Leeds go down. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Leeds should have probably lost. Brighton I've never been to, although I imagine that Gary Lineker would quite like Brighton because it's full of rainbow flags and woke people.
I think that's a fair point. The tofu-eating wokerati.
This is the moment satire died. Now, amongst all this, the public perception of the issue was turning as politicians and figures suddenly started being a bit more complimentary of Gary. During this time, many people pointed out that presenters and faces of flagship shows have publicly shared their own political views online and in other media outlets. For example, take Lord Sugar, who once shared a photo of the Senegal national team with racist connotations, posted rail strikes, shared that Photoshop of Jeremy Corbyn with Hitler, told people not to vote Labour, and even shared misconceptions about HIV. Yet, after all that, he's still fronting The Apprentice, and he's still dishing out some of the weirdest put-downs on TV that somehow got through the edit.
He looks a bit confused to me, like a baby on a topless beach.
Well, we actually took that picture, so that was quite a hectic moment of holding him down. I found a napkin on the table, so I thought, let's put that on his...
Now, during this time, reporters were camped outside his front door as they tried to doorstep Gary and get him to share any update or ask him if he's going to tell Tim Davie to f*** off and punch him in the face. Now, this coverage was largely pointless as he wasn't really going to say anything, and swarming a beloved TV presenter and football legend isn't really going to win you brownie points with the public. If anything, it just showed that Gary Lineker is actually quite a boring person.
The man at the centre of the row over BBC impartiality today had little to say.
I'm going to walk my dog and I'm going to do my shopping, so would you mind letting me do it on my own?
Now, the reason why Gary Lineker has taken over the coverage of this matter is because it's distracting the public from other issues this country is facing. The UK right now is enduring an unprecedented cost of living crisis with rising food costs, food shortages, high fuel prices, rising inflation, and countless industry strikes over pay. Focusing on legal immigration is a political point scoring, and one that always stirs up an emotional reaction and distracts people from the issues that actually really matter. Outlets like the Daily Telegraph, The Sun, The Times, they're all vocal Conservative Party backers, and often have a direct link to the government, and were most likely fed lines to share about Gary Lineker. The discussion about whether Gary was right to compare Suella Braverman's rhetoric on the discussion aims to distract people from the actual policy. Being likened to 1930s Germany is one that's going to provide quite a strong response of his connotations, and people are going to think he's probably gone a bit too far. Plus, Gary Lineker is a vocal critic of government policies, and outlets are just stirring up some controversy in an attempt to silence him or smear him. The emotive lines and quotes also naturally evoke some emotional responses from the public, and they will most likely share those thoughts and feelings on social media. And the BBC is an easy target. It's publicly funded, scrutinised more than any other outlet in this country, and issues like this spark wider discussions about the licence fee and how far does impartiality really actually go. Yet the language used by Suella Braverman to describe the boats as an invasion, making a sharp contrast to the willingness of this country to accept the Ukrainians fleeing a war-torn country. I guess if they came by boat, they would have been shipped off to Rwanda. After a weekend of support for Gary and further speculation on his future, what this means to the BBC, and what everyone in the media seemed to think about the situation, there was a breakthrough.
Bit of breaking news we can bring you. Gary Lineker is due to return to hosting sport for the BBC.
Now Gary Lineker was allowed back. It was announced that he would continue as a BBC presenter after BBC apologised for a difficult period for staff, contributors, presenters, and most importantly, our audiences. In a statement issued on Twitter, Gary described the last few days as surreal, thanked his fellow BBC Sport colleagues for their remarkable show of solidarity. He then also appeared to address the issue of migration again, saying his difficult weekend doesn't compare to the having to flee your home from persecution or war to seek refuge in a land far away. Tim Davie said Lineker will abide by the editorial guidelines until a review of BBC social media policy is complete. He announced the review will be led by an independent expert, which will have a particular focus on how it applies to freelancers outside of news and current affairs. I wonder who they'll pick for that. So there you have it. Gary Lineker overtook the main news story and became the focus of a complex and controversial bill, which meanwhile is still going for Parliament, and at the time of this recording has actually gone for the second reading. The BBC is now coming to terms with its own impartiality limits and realising how they misjudged the situation, now probably hoping that everyone forgot what just happened and just carries on as normal. I guess you could say it's all been a bit of an own goal. Thank you for watching. If you have got this far in the video, I do hope you like the video, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and drop your comments below on how you feel about this whole situation. It's been a bit of a weird few days, really. This video has probably come out a bit too late as well. It turns out that, juggling a full-time job with a YouTube channel he's trying to start up is a bit of a difficult juggling act, really.